All right, guys, in front of us we've got two different battle belts here, so different gun belt setups I'm going to talk about and give you some breakdown and some pros and cons to each one. All right, so the first one we'll talk about is the Tactical belt. So this is, I think, the Generation 1 Tactical gun belt. So I bought this in, I think, 2009, but I had it while I was at the unit. Didn't use it until really late, until close to the end of my career. And I'll explain why for the most part. But so what we have here is the inner belt. Right. What I do like about the inner belt is it does come with an added component of padding there. So when you're wearing the gear for a long time, it doesn't look like much, but it does make a difference. The outer belt. What I do really like about it is the flexibility of this belt. So when you're climbing in and around, confined spaces, vehicles, and stuff of that nature, the belt does flex really well with you. So I do like that component. The Cobra Buckle itself is bomber, so we're not worried about that failing. And then, if you need to strap yourself off to the inside of a chopper or a lanyard, or any reason that you needed to be retained into a fixture, you have that added component. So double mag pouch, what you'll notice is they're open cover, right? So there's nothing retaining that other than the friction of the retention itself for those magazines. Pros to that is, it's quick, it's readily accessible. The cons to that is there's nothing keeping that magazine into the holster itself. Similarly, so this particular double mag pouch is made by Grey Fox Strategic. This particular AR-15 magazine is made by High Speed Gear. So what I do like about this type of taco magazine holder is you can literally deploy that magazine from multiple different angles. The friction of the retention that's built into the material with the bungee cord is really good. It's really done really well. But again, the negative is there's nothing to retain that from being pried out. And then dump pouch. So there's multiple different dump pouches out there. What I like about this dump pouch is the flexibility and the ergonomics of it. It's not overly large. It's not too rigid, so it does it flexes quite a bit. And overall, it's just a simple component to, hang on to pieces of gear that maybe you don't need, or, shotgun shells if you're doing some shotgun work, whatever it might be. And then the individual IFAK kit. So with this particular IFAK kit, it's Blue Force gear, and in there's the essentials. So something to help with massive bleeds, perhaps an MPA for airway opening, and maybe a compression bandage, right? So personal choice, everything that's in there is what you may need in the unlikely event that a medical situation presents itself. And then the holster itself, we talked about this in the past, Grey Fox Strategic, they make really good gear. Pros and cons to this particular holster is this is something that I would use probably on the range, in a training setting, but operationally I would be hesitant to use this simply because the only thing that holds the gun into place is the passive friction with the retention hardware that you see outlined here between my fingers. All right, so there's no level 2, no locking mechanism, no level 3 to keep this gun in its holster other than the friction of the hardware. All right, so some pros and cons. Great belt, very reliable. I know it's not going to fail me. There are some pros and cons. So in the earlier years of my career, this is typically what I would wear. So something that's a little bit more robust. This particular gun belt is made by High Speed Gear. And the thing that I do like about it is the type of material that they have on the inside line. It is a rubberized friction material, so it prevents the gun from sliding around. It prevents the belt from moving other than where you want it to. Does it move? Yes, it does. However, this type of material does keep it in place quite well. Cobra Buckle, very similar to previously. It has components of it that you can latch yourself into the inside of a chopper or otherwise. And then, what you don't see here is the individualized IFAK kit, which I would place in this particular component, similar to the one I showed you from Blue Force Gear. Dump pouch. This particular dump pouch is a Tactical dump pouch, and as you notice, it's just a little bit bigger, a little bit deeper. Pros and cons to that. Being a smaller guy, I'm trying to keep things as small and as light as possible, so not ideal. I prefer something like the smaller one that I have here, but it's still a great pouch, does what it needs to do. And then what we have here is we got a variation of a high-speed gear toggle pouch, right, for the pistols, pistol magazines. And then this particular mag pouch from Black Point Tactical out of the States. What I do like about this particular AR-15 magazine holder is the hardware that keeps it in place. It's built with a little bit of leather, as well as the hardware that keeps it fixed to the belt. So it does have some flexibility with it. It will manipulate and move with the body as we're moving. So I do like this component. And then the holster itself. So this would be something that I would lean towards from an operational context. This particular holster is made by Safariland, and it's called the ALS, so the automatic locking system. As the holster and the gun meet, there is a notable audible click that you'll hear and you'll feel. But with the level 2, it gives you that element of confidence where if you get turned upside down, or if you're in a physical altercation in a CQB setting, for example, there's less fear of this gun being dislodged from the holster while you're dealing with what you need to do. Of course, there are components of weapon retention that are always going to be at the forefront of the thought process whenever there's a physical altercation. However, the system, the way that it's built, I do like it. The thumb release is on the inside, that's protected. So when you do need to draw that gun, it is very gross motor in terms of swiping at the thumb retention to draw the gun. It does give you that level of confidence. So this would be something I would lean towards in an operational context. A holster like this would be something I would lean towards. If we're on the range, we're doing some training. Yes, it is important that we train as we fight. So if I was in an everyday operational context, this would be what I would use, both training and operational. What I'm suggesting is, depending on what your job is and depending on what level of comfort you have with retention, this is going to be operator choice. So for me personally, I would lean more towards something like this. Both are great. Both have the pros and cons, strengths and limitations within. All right, guys, another alternative. This particular gun belt is made by Warrior Gear, also located here in Canada. And there's a couple things that are a little bit different from the Tactical Canadian version and the Warrior belt. The Warrior Gear belt is a little bit more rigid, what I've noticed so far since using it. Good and bad. What I do like about the flexibility is it does tend to contour with your body a little bit more. Now that being said, it still has some give. I just wanted to make note that what I've noticed is very, very well built, high quality. I'm not concerned of this thing failing me at all. This thing can be driven over by a tank and it's going to function. But I will talk about slightly different variations that we have. So the particular inner belt that would go into the belt loops of your pants, for example, I like to keep things as simple and as streamlined as possible. So what you'll notice is what I asked the builder to do is to make the inner belt as smooth and as little hardware as possible. So what you'll notice is it's just the female end and the male end of the Velcro itself, and then the nylon material. Keeps it simplified. Can use this as an everyday carry belt or an everyday wear belt. If you didn't have the gun belt integrated, by all means you could still use that as a perfectly functional belt. So what I do like about it is the simplicity of it. What I'm not necessarily a huge fan of is how much Velcro, we'll call this the male end, how much Velcro of the male end takes up the belt itself. Where in comparison, if you look at, keep in mind, this is an early model of Tactical. They have since changed the style, but as a consideration. The inner belt, what I do like about this inner belt is the padding that they put into it. So when you're wearing this gear for 7, 8, 9 hours a day, it does make a little bit of a difference. The great thing about this belt is, when you're not wearing the gun belt itself, so the battle belt, but just the inner belt, it's comfortable. What I don't like about it is the male end, so the rough end, if you will, is what would be on the inner belt. So that's facing out. So when you're not wearing the gun belt, everything tends to stick to that. So your t-shirts, whatever shirt over garment you might be wearing is going to stick to that. So yeah, is it a big deal? No, but it is a factor for sure. What I do really like about it though is if you notice how narrow the Velcro is itself, I like that personally speaking. When you do set it up, it grabs well, it doesn't move at all, but it's minimal. So you don't need, in my opinion, you don't need the 1.5 or 1.75 inch amount of material for the male and female Valpro end. So those are a couple differences with the inner and outer belt. So the Tier Tactical and then the Warrior Gear. What you'll notice about the gun belt itself is, so the Tier Tactical, it does have a little bit more flexibility to it. It's not as rigid. Now keep in mind, you know, I purchased this belt in 2009, so it's got a lot of miles on it, where this one is still relatively new. I've only been using it for a couple of months. Now if you can have a quick look here, I'll just put it, highlight a couple of different ways that I set it up. So this particular gun belt is what I've worn for the last little while. I'm very comfortable with it. It contours to the body quite well. Just to try something different, when I set this belt up, if you notice the holster loops, so you know the universal belt loop retention holster, I fed this one in on the Warrior belt just a little bit differently than I fed the Tier Tactical, and I did that for a reason. I wanted to see what way this would set to my body and what way it would contour and move more freely. So far, what I've noticed is the way that this one's set up, it does hug my hip a little bit more consistently, and I like the way it feels. So what I'm going to do is most likely I'm going to switch this around, so I'm just going to feed it in the opposite way. So you won't see this, it'll be on the outside of the actual holster hanger itself. So it's subtle, but I thought I would try it just to see how it contours to the body. All right, so we're going to flip it over. You'll notice that with the two holsters, I've got a red dot fixed on both these firearms. So Zev Technologies OZ9 with a Trijicon SRO sight. And then I have a hybrid. This is a Glock 17 Generation 3 lower. So the frame itself is a Glock, and then the slide is a Zev Technologies SOCOM slide. And it's fixed with a Leopold Delta Point Pro 2. All right, so those are, you know, the holsters. Both are passive retention holsters, and both are fixed with a Streamlight TLR 8 Alpha. So it's got the red laser and the white light. So both are fixed with the exact same holster hardware, as well as the light and laser fixture. And then the only thing that you don't see on this particular Warrior Gear gun belt is the individual IFAK, and then everything else is virtually the same. So double mag pouches, an AR-15 pouch. What you will notice about the two different setups for the AR-15 pouches is the depth of the way it sits. So these are small considerations, but the devil is in the details. What I do like about this particular high-speed gear AR-15 magazine pouch is the way that it sits. It sits a little bit lower, so if you can imagine, this is around my hips. You know, my butt would be here. The way it sits a little bit lower towards the hamstring, it contours to the body a little bit more freely. Because there's less material of the magazine up towards where my floating rib would be, I don't notice it. I don't notice it nearly as much when I have the rig on, where the straps of the carrier or the rig, it doesn't interfere. So I do like the way that the profile of this magazine sits. What I dislike about this one is it's at the same, virtually the same depth, if you will, from the pistol magazines. And what I do find is because of how much magazine of the AR-15 sits higher up, it's that component that gets caught up on the carrier straps. It's a component that, depending on how I'm bending and moving, I feel that magazine in my floating ribs. So these are small considerations. If I were to, you know, mismatch the two, I'm sure I would find the 95% solution that is ideal for most scenarios. That being said, these are all considerations when you're thinking about how to set up your gun belt.